I'm Philip Sabin, and this video shows a complete game of Jim Dunnigan's classic 1970s design, Napoleon at Waterloo, using the latest version of my own tweaks to improve the game's realism without amending or adding to the original map and counters. Like so many others, I was inspired as a child by Sergei Bondarchuk's epic 1970 film on Waterloo. I am posting this video and updated conversion to coincide with the release of Ridley Scott's new movie on Napoleon, which will doubtless trigger renewed interest in the period. My conversion may be played using any edition of the published game components, or on screen using the freely posted original rules. But I play it here using my new bespoke 3D playset with 450 painted Airfix figures, each of which represents around 400 real troops, or 50 cannon. The wooden houses and pinecone trees are at a smaller scale than the figures, and I use hex-shaped bases to maximize space for the troops and to allow me to use a simple array of dots instead of a full painted hex grid. The front and back of each base have printed labels readable from either side of the table, showing the unit's ID, commander, and combat and movement factors. Later editions of the published game cut out most of the redundant space on the original uncoloured 1971 map, and my 2 square metre figure version omits the 3 northernmost hex rows as well, since they are not needed in my tweaked redesign. I posted the first edition of my tweaks on Board Game Geek in April 2020, and 750 gamers have downloaded them since then. Coincidentally, another wargaming emeritus professor, the renowned Napoleonic historian Charles Esdale, has since published an article and now an entire book on Wargaming Waterloo, posted freely online by the US Marine Corps University Press. Charles focuses heavily on the simple Napoleon at Waterloo system, and he suggests his own independent tweaks, including some additional counters, to make the game into a better simulation. Although his amendments as they stand are problematic in several respects, his work inspired me to develop a thoroughly revised second edition of my own tweaks, incorporating the best of Charles's suggestions, as well as new ideas of my own, to create a more realistic conversion of Dunnigan's classic design. Waterloo is the focus not only of dozens of different board games, but also of hundreds of books, so there is no shortage of scholarship on which to base far more detailed designs than Napoleon at Waterloo. Mark Adkins' 2001 Waterloo Companion is an especially valuable reference source. Perhaps surprisingly, however, historians still disagree fundamentally about some key aspects of the battle, due to the often biased, contradictory, and downright mendacious nature of the primary sources. Charles Esdale's work draws on the latest scholarship and his own analysis of the battlefield to challenge some persistent myths, in particular the hitherto universal belief that Napoleon saw the Prussians early on in the distance and sent his 6th Corps from its alleged central reserve position to intercept them. Charles suggests that the Prussian attack in fact came as a complete surprise to the French, and only coincidentally encountered 6th Corps arriving on the field late, east of Plancenoit. Charles's own proposed tweaks remove the 5 units of 6th Corps, to arrive later as reinforcements further east. But I instead sidestep this scholarly controversy by leaving the units in place, while ruling that they may move on turns 1 to 3 only if each hex takes them closer to the east map edge. Whether this is due to Mouton's men being sent east by a forewarned Napoleon, or arriving there belatedly from the south, as argued by revisionists like Charles, the effect is to stop them being used to attack the Anglo-Allies before the Prussian onslaught. My own research for my 1 to 400 figure version of the battle found that the biggest problems with the army modelling in the original game concerned the Anglo-Allies rather than the French. So it is here where I focus my own, deliberately minimal, tweaks. On Wellington's right, I move the Hougoumont detachment back from the woods, which Ray's men cleared before the game begins, to the chateau itself, and I treat the unit as having a strength of 3 rather than 1, to reflect the guards companies progressively sent down to bolster the original Nassau garrison. I also moved the right reserve cavalry back to replace Clinton's 2nd Division, which moves back in turn to replace the 4th Division in reserve near Mer-Brenne. I removed the 4th Division altogether, since only Mitchell's brigade was actually present, and this can be folded in with Cook's 1st Division to offset the guardsmen sent forward to Hougoumont. I moved the 1st Corps artillery from Wellington's left to a position overlooking Hougoumont, since the original game completely misses the actual concentration of cannon on the Anglo-Allied right. Picton's 5th Division, with its famous Highland units, is moved to take the artillery's place and face the initial assault by Drouet-d'Erlon's 1st Corps. I move Lambert's 6th Division left, into the position originally containing Perponcher's 2nd Netherlands Division, which I remove altogether, as I did the 4th British Division. This is because Saxe-Weimar's Nassau Brigade was actually deployed to garrison Hougoumont and the eastern farms from Papelotte to Frischemont. Since these eastern farms were left mostly unmolested, I rule for simplicity that the French may never enter them, but that they give no defence bonus to stronger Allied units passing through. This abstractly reflects the reality of the situation far better than in the first edition of my tweaks, which left Perponcher's division as a concentrated unit and treated the farms as empty building hexes, open to occupation and defence by either side. Perponcher's division also contained the ill-fated brigade led by Bryant, but I fold this into Picton's division alongside Kempt's and Pack's brigades, while treating Winker's Hanoverians on the far left as part of the 6th rather than the 5th Division, together with Best's Hanoverians and the late-arriving British brigade led by acting divisional commander Lambert. I retain the most distinctive feature of my original amendments, namely that all Anglo-Allied infantry and artillery units begin shielded, as an abstract reflection of Wellington's use of reverse slopes and fortified farmhouses to shield his men from view and attack. Instead of rotating units to show shielded status, as I do in the board game, my figure version distinguishes them by adding walls in the Hougoumont and La Haye-Sainte farms, and removable cork hills elsewhere. The units become permanently unshielded when they leave their initial hexes for any reason. Shielded units receive a defence bonus, and those in the farms need not attack or retreat. But unshielded infantry units suffer an attack penalty, and unshielded artillery units now lose their ability to bombard at a distance, to make it harder for the Anglo-Allies to manoeuvre offensively and use cannon in a mobile fire support role like the French and Prussians. Playtesting of both editions of my tweaks clearly suggests that each game turn equates better to 90 minutes of action than to the 60 minutes claimed in the original game. I therefore have just 6 game turns, starting at 1 p.m. when First Corps launched its historical assault, and with artillery bombardment banned on turn 6 due to gathering dusk. Like Charles, I now use movement restrictions to stop players unrealistically rushing all their units into action from the outset, as tends to happen in the original game. The Anglo-Allied flank guards and the French Guard cavalry now may not move until turn 2, and the 3 French Guard infantry units on the south board edge may not move until turn 4. I also ban all French units from moving within 4 hexes of either side edge, to stop them bottling up the Prussians near the board edge, or launching an unrealistic flanking manoeuvre through Braine-l'Alleud. Together with the constraints which I have already discussed regarding 6th Corps and the eastern farms, these restrictions disproportionately affect Napoleon's army, and mean that the French are far less likely to rout the Allies than they were with the first edition of my tweaks. Charles is pleased that his own amendments create an imbalanced game, since this supports his view that the unexpected Prussian ambush made it very unlikely for Napoleon to prevail. However, I am conscious that competitive gamers crave a more level playing field. I have therefore added an optional handicap system, which gives the French game victory if the Allies lose just 30 strength points, rather than the 40 needed to cause an actual rout. This game victory threshold may be modified if desired, by giving command of the Allies to the lowest bidder, making this imbalanced battle into a finely balanced game. Players may also easily experiment with what-if possibilities, such as an earlier release of Napoleon's Guard, or having the Prussians arrive later, or not at all. To discourage either side from unrealistically pulling back and playing for time, I rule that Hougoumont and La Sainte add 6 each to the Allied loss total if occupied by a French unit, while Plancenoit adds 6 to the French loss total if occupied by an Allied unit. These geographical objectives help to encourage French players to focus their attacks on Wellington's centre between Hougoumont and Papelotte, as happened historically. I also rule that if either unit of Napoleon's Old and Middle Guard is lost, there is a similar extra 6-point penalty to reflect the shock felt in the French army as a whole. The combat results table in Napoleon at Waterloo is far less forgiving than in SPI's later Napoleon at War quadrigame, and makes player skill crucial in finding the extra strength points to push an attack up to 2-1 or 3-1 odds, or to avoid falling to 1-2 odds, with the risk of attacker elimination. My tweaks limit the odds allowed against shielded units due to their partial concealment, or when non-cavalry attack cavalry. And against horsemen, I convert the mutually bloody exchange results to defender retreats, saving attackers from risking disproportionate losses. I also add 1 to the die roll when attacking shielded units, or when unshielded Anglo-Allied infantry attack, and I deduct 1 from the roll when French cavalry attack enemies not in woods or buildings. These die roll modifiers have a more nuanced effect than column shifts. The +1 attack penalty encourages Wellington's troops to stay in their well-chosen initial positions for as long as possible. The -1 attack bonus offsets the individual weakness of Napoleon's cavalry units compared to the fewer but stronger units of Allied horse, thereby tempting the French to launch cavalry charges like those which famously assailed Wellington's infantry squares. To offset cavalry's weaker combat strength compared to infantry, I rule that cavalry may move 1 hex to avoid having to launch suicidal attacks on adjacent enemy infantry or artillery, and that infantry or artillery must pay an extra movement point to end next to enemy cavalry. Hence, if Jérôme Bonaparte's outsize 6th Infantry Division opts to bypass the Hougoumont Chateau on turn 1, it cannot quite reach Wellington's right reserve cavalry in its new position. Were the 2nd British and 3rd Netherlands Infantry Divisions free to move on turn 1, they could not reach Piret's 2nd Cavalry Division in its current location for similar reasons. This serves to reflect cavalry's historical screening and delaying role. On turn 1 of my refight, Napoleon instead opts to take advantage of the temporary immobility of the Anglo-Allied flank guards by advancing Ray's strong 6th and 9th Divisions around the Hougoumont woods to attack the chateau itself, as they did historically. Only the Woods Road hex is passable for game purposes, and even then only through the road hex side, except for retreating units like the Nassau troops on the previous 11:30 a.m. turn. Ray's artillery accompanies Foy's 9th Division, and Bachelou's 5th Division advances to cover the right flank. Kellermann's 11th and 12th Cavalry Divisions move to protect Jérôme's left flank, linking up with Perret's 2nd Cavalry Division, which remains at the minimum allowed distance of 5 hexes from the western board edge. On Napoleon's right, Drouet-d'Erlon's 4 infantry divisions opt to replicate their own major assault on Wellington's left centre, before Lambert's 6th Division is released to counterattack. Jacquinot's 1st Cavalry Division advances through the narrow gap between La Haye and Smohain to cover the right flank, while Milhaud's cuirassiers move west into a reserve position just behind the Grand Battery. Mouton's 6th Corps may only move east for reasons I discussed earlier, and it does so at a measured pace to retain some flexibility within this overall constraint. The French begin by attacking the 3-point Hougoumont garrison. Instead of doubling all units defending in woods or buildings, as in the original rules, I add 3 to the defence strength of infantry or artillery, or 5 if the attackers include cavalry. This stops strong units benefiting unduly, and shows the inutility of cavalry in such terrain. Jérôme's and Foy's divisions total 12 strength points, just enough for a 2-to-1 attack, without needing the artillery to fire in support along the edge of the woods. The die roll of 1 rises to 2 due to the penalty for attacking a shielded unit, and it would normally eliminate the defenders, since they have no hex free of French zones of control into which to retreat. But MacDonald's garrison exploits its ability to ignore defender retreat results, so the combat ends in a stalemate, with Ray's strongest units bogged down around the chateau and unable to threaten the rest of Wellington's line. In the centre, Marconnier's 3rd Division next attacks Picton's strong 5th Division, with supporting fire from the 1st Corps artillery raising the odds to 7-7, or 1-1. The roll of 6 remains 6, despite the +1 penalty against shielded units, and Marconnier is roundly repulsed by the Highlanders, opting to displace his supporting cannon to allow him to retreat. Picton declines to advance, so as not to lose his precious shielded status. The divisions of Quillot and Donzelot now attack La Haye-Sainte, supported by the Guard artillery, giving odds of 14-6, or 2-1. The roll of 3 rises to 4 for the shielding, and, as at Hougoumont, a stalemate ensues, as the garrison ignores the defender retreat result. The first French combat phase ends with no points lost by either side. Relieved at having withstood Napoleon's attacks so far, Wellington sends his right reserve cavalry, under Dornberg and Grant, west, while moving his black-suited Brunswickers up from reserve to take its place. On his left, Wellington opts for a more aggressive response to the French attacks, sending his left reserve cavalry under Vivian and Vandeleur to engage Jacquinot's horsemen, while his general and heavy reserve cavalry charge Drouet-d'Erlon's infantry, as they did historically. The farm garrisons prudently decline to attack, so as to avoid being retreated, or worse. So the Allies begin by resolving the charge by the heavy reserve horsemen, including Somerset's Life Guards, against Marconnier's 3rd Division. If this succeeds, it will cut off the retreat of the neighbouring French 2nd and 4th Divisions. The odds are 4-4, or 1-1, so with no modifiers, the combat is a straight 50-50 affair. On a roll of 3, Somerset succeeds in driving Marcognet back, displacing Delort's cuirassiers. The impetuosity of charging British cavalry means they cannot decline to pursue into the vacated hex, even if they wish to. The General Reserve Cavalry, including Ponsonby's Union Brigade, now charges Durut's division to capitalise on Somerset's success. The odds are again 4-4, or 1-1. On a roll of 2, Ponsonby triumphs and breaks Durut's trapped infantry, with his Scots Greys pursuing exultantly, as they did in reality. Picton's 5th Division now makes the highest stakes attack of the turn, engaging Donzelot's strong 2nd Division to see if First Corps will be decisively broken, or if the Highlanders will lose their shielding after all, and leave the exposed cavalry in the lurch. The odds of 7-5 again round down to 1-1. On a roll of 4, Wellington's luck runs out, and Picton's men must fall back, with a relieved Donzelot declining to expose himself further by pursuing. The left reserve horse now charge Jacquinot's 1st Cavalry Division at odds of 3-2, or 1-1. On a roll of 6, the charge is definitively repulsed, with Jacquinot declining to pursue. Wellington ends his combat phase by bombarding the French with his 2 unengaged artillery units, but the odds in both cases are 1-2, so on rolls of 3 there is no effect. The Allies lead the victory count by 4 points to 0, but the likely destruction of the heavy reserve cavalry should soon even the score, and a key Anglo-Allied infantry unit has lost its shielding, compromising the security of Wellington's left. On turn 2, most of Napoleon's best units are pinned in place by the stalemate around the farms and the Anglo-Allied cavalry charge. On his left, he shifts Perret's horsemen back slightly, while Guillot's newly released Guard heavy cavalry move up into the front line, and Rey's artillery is transferred to aid the fighting in the centre. On Napoleon's right, the chances of a sweeping cavalry encirclement are stymied by the Nassau-held farms and by the looming arrival of the Prussians. Jacquinot's cavalry is instead moved back behind the farms, while 6th Corps continues marching slowly east, led by Domon's horsemen. The Guard light cavalry use their speed to ride swiftly west, ready to join an assault on Wellington's right next turn. Rey begins the action by trying again to take the fortress of Hougoumont, with the odds still being 12-6, or 2-1. On a roll of 6, the +1 shielding modifier is redundant, and Jérôme's and Foy's divisions are driven back from the chateau into adjacent vacant hexes, at least regaining their freedom of action next turn. On his right, Napoleon decides that he cannot risk failing to destroy Somerset's horsemen, so he adds Rey's cannon to the attack by the Guard artillery and Marcognet's vengeful infantry, raising the odds to 12-4, or 3-1, the minimum required to assure success in the absence of the -1 die roll bonus had French cavalry had room to join the counter-attack. The roll of 1 destroys Wellington's horsemen outright, though they would have been doomed anyway due to their lack of a path of retreat. Marcognet's men advance to retake the vacated hex. The 1st Corps artillery now engage Ponsonby's cavalry in a dangerous attack at 3-4 or 1-2 odds, which could cause their elimination. On another roll of 1, the French gunners instead succeed against the odds in driving Wellington's horsemen back. They cannot follow up even if they wish to, since artillery may never advance in my tweaked version of the game. It is now time for Quiot and Donzelot's divisions to repeat their assault on La Haye-Sainte. But without the benefit of artillery support, the odds have fallen to 9-6, or 1-1, giving no chance of the exchange result needed to take the farm. The roll of 3 rises to 4 due to the defenders' shielding, so the French infantry must pull back, displacing the cannon behind them. There are now no continuing engagements anywhere along the line, so both armies are free to manoeuvre as desired. Losses are equal at 4 points each, but Napoleon is losing precious time before the Prussians arrive. Wellington is content to play for time and leave his front-line units safely shielded. But on his right he calls Clinton's and Chassey's newly released divisions forward to prepare for a resumption of hostilities with Rey's Second Corps, while his Brunswickers and right reserve cavalry move to guard the flank and exploit the French move restrictions near the board edge. On his left, Wellington moves Picton's division back into its original position, with the General Reserve Cavalry riding back to link it with Lambert's still shielded 6th Division, and with the left reserve horsemen helping the Nassauers in the farms to guard the flank. The Anglo-Allied 1st Corps artillery bombard Guyot's Guard cavalry at odds of 3-4 or 1-2, while the 2nd Corps and reserve artillery team up to bombard Bachelu's infantry at odds of 5-4 or 1-1. On rolls of 2 and 3, respectively, only Bachelou is pushed back, displacing the Guard light cavalry, but doing little to hinder the impending French assault. On turn 3, Napoleon realizes that he must inflict significant further damage soon, if he is to have any chance of breaking the Anglo-Allies before the Prussians can save them. On his left, he decides that his best course is to renew Rey's attack on Hougoumont, rather than trying to bypass the chateau to attack Wellington's main line. He shifts Kellermann's cavalry back a little to reduce its exposure to the stronger Anglo-Allied forces now present. Bachelu's 5th Division guards Foy's right flank, as before. In the centre, Napoleon mounts an even more massive assault than on turn 1. Drouet-d'Erlon's 3 surviving infantry divisions attack again, supported by all available cannon. The 1st and Guard light cavalry divisions cover their right flank, while Guyot's Guard heavy cavalry and Wattier's cuirassiers charge Wellington's shielded infantry and artillery on their left. Only Delort's cavalry are detached and sent east to aid Mouton's horsemen in delaying the imminent advance of Blucher's infantry. I am pleased that my new attack bonus for French cavalry encourages charges like those which Napoleon's horsemen famously made against Wellington's infantry squares at exactly this place and time, as portrayed so evocatively in the famous panoramic painting on the battlefield itself. Rey begins with his renewed attack on Hougoumont at 12-6 or 2-1 odds. The roll of 6 remains unchanged by the shielded modifier and forces Rey's men to retreat once again. Guyot's Guard horsemen now charge the 2nd Corps cannon at odds of 4-2 or 2-1. The -1 bonus for French cavalry attacks offsets the +1 penalty for the defenders being shielded. On a roll of 2, Wellington's guns must retreat, losing their shielded status, and hence their ability to bombard. Guyot declines to expose his troopers further by advancing. It is now time to pay the piper, since with French cannon committed elsewhere, Wattier's must make a hopeless diversionary attack on both Cook's Guard infantry and the 1st Corps artillery, causing the automatic loss of his cuirassiers. Cook does not forfeit his shielding by advancing. In the centre, Napoleon uses his 1st and 2nd Corps cannon to bombard Picton's and Alton's infantry, respectively. There is no chance of driving them back, since the 3-7 odds against Picton round down to 1-3, and since Alton's shielded bonus removes the 1 in 6 chance of a defender retreat at odds of 3-6, or 1-2. The bombardment serves its purpose regardless, by allowing all 3 First Corps infantry divisions to combine for a fresh assault on La Haye-Sainte, with the support of the Guard artillery raising the odds to 18-6, or the maximum permitted 3-1 attack, giving 2 chances in 6 of taking the farm. The roll of 5 rises to 6 for the shielded bonus, and does indeed produce the desired exchange result. Wellington's reserve artillery is destroyed, at the cost of Keogh's 4-point 1st Division also being lost. Donzelot's stronger 2nd Division advances to occupy the farm. The extra 6-point hit to Allied morale for losing La Haye-Sainte, a turn earlier than it fell historically, boosts Napoleon into the lead in the victory count by 13 points to 9. However, both armies are still a long way from routing, and it will take much more bloodshed before the contest is finally decided. Wellington responds aggressively to the crisis, advancing the units on his right to protect Hougoumont against yet another renewal of Rey's assault, and sending Dornberg and Grant to charge Piret's horsemen guarding Napoleon's flank. In the centre, Wellington commits his final meagre reserve of the Dutch-Belgian light cavalry to aid Cook in countering Guyot's horsemen. He sends his 2nd Corps cannon round to help Alton try to retake La Haye-Sainte, and he forfeits Lambert's shielding, so that his 6th Division may join Picton and Ponsonby in a full-blooded counter-attack on Napoleon's right. Bulow's 4th Corps bursts forth from the Paris woods on a wide front stretching as far as Smohain. The infantry cannot afford the extra cost of moving next to Napoleon's cavalry screen, but Prince Wilhelm's horsemen gallop ahead to charge Delort's outnumbered cuirassiers. Wellington sends Vivian and Vandeleur riding through La Haye to assail the flank of Domon's 3rd Cavalry Division as it strives to delay the Prussian advance. The right reserve horse begin by attacking Piret's 2nd Cavalry Division at 3-2 or 1-1 odds. On a roll of 4, Dornberg and Grant are repelled, with Piret unable to occupy the vacated hex even if he wished to, since it's too close to the side edge. The 1st Corps artillery bombard Bachelu's 5th Division at 3-4 or 1-2 odds, narrowly failing to drive them back on a roll of 2. Cook's guardsmen now attack Guyot's guard-heavy cavalry, with the addition of the Dutch-Belgian horse bringing the odds up to 8-4 or 2-1. On another roll of 4, Guyot is driven back, and opts to displace Rey's cannon to retain their crucial bombardment capability next turn. Cook again declines to advance to avoid losing his shielded status. Had the 1-5 cavalry been a British 3-5 or 4-5 unit, it would have been required to pursue impetuously into the vacated hex. As it is, the weaker but less headstrong Netherlands horsemen now take advantage for the first time in this refight of a key provision in my tweaks to offset the unrealistic benefits of alternate hex defence tactics in the original game. They opt to advance not into the vacated hex itself, but into the vacant adjacent hex to the left, thereby surrounding Donzelot in La Haye-Sainte and dooming his division if it can be forced out of the recently captured farm. Wellington now makes what may turn out to be the most consequential attack of the game, by Alton's 3rd Division and the 2nd Corps artillery on Donzelot's 2nd Division. If it succeeds, it would liberate La Haye-Sainte and destroy this strong French unit into the bargain. But if it fails, Alten will have to fall back and lose his precious shielded status. The combined attack strength of 8 is just enough to match Donzelot's defence strength, including the building bonus, and there is no die roll penalty since Alten's infantry are still shielded. So, as with Picton's similar attack on the surrounded Donzelot on turn 1, this is a straight 50-50 contest. To Wellington's delight, the roll of 2 this time puts paid to Donzelot's division and frees the farm. The already unshielded cannon may not advance to reoccupy it, so, with significant misgivings, Wellington finally decides to forfeit Alten's precious shielded status to allow his stronger infantry division to do so. Picton's 5th Division follows up by attacking Marconnier's neighbouring unit, the only one of Drouet-d'Erlon's 4 infantry divisions still unbroken. The odds of 7-4 round down to 1-1, and there's a +1 penalty because Picton is now unshielded. The roll of 6 remains unchanged, and means that Picton's men must fall back, as they did on turn 1, with the already exposed Marcognet not making things worse by pursuing. Wellington now resolves Ponsonby's charge on Jacquinot's horsemen, at odds of 4-2, or 2-1. On a roll of 3, Jacquinot predictably pulls back, with Ponsonby's impetuous troopers having no option but to pursue. Lambert's 6th Division now attacks Lefebvre-Desnouett's Guard Light Cavalry at similar odds of 6-3, or 2-1, but with a +1 modifier because the British infantry are unshielded. The roll of 1 rises to 2, and forces the Guard horsemen also to fall back, displacing First Corps' cannon. Wellington had hoped to surround and destroy the Guard cavalry, had Picton's attack been successful. But now he faces a tortuous dilemma. If Lambert stays put, he risks letting the headstrong Scots Greys be surrounded and destroyed, just as they were in reality. But if he advances, his own even more valuable division may suffer a similar fate. With a heavy heart, Wellington orders Lambert to stand fast and let the horsemen pay the price of their impetuosity. The left reserve cavalry south of La Haye now charge Domon's outnumbered troopers from the flank at odds of 3-1. The roll of 6 would normally yield a disastrous exchange result, but luckily for Wellington, this is converted to a defender-retreat result against cavalry. With only one escape route which stays far enough from the side edge, and that running into the Prussian horse, Domon's division is destroyed instead. Here again, the headstrong attackers have no option but to pursue into the vacated hex itself. Prince Wilhelm's horsemen now charge Delort's cuirassiers, with supporting fire from the corps artillery raising the odds to a crushing 6-1. Delort's division is automatically destroyed, and although the disciplined Prussian cavalry may choose whether and where to advance, they opt to occupy the vacated hex regardless, since this offers the best position to delay marches by Napoleon's Guard infantry to cover Plancenoit. By retaking La Haye-Sainte and destroying 7 more points of French units, Wellington and Blücher have swung the victory balance back to 16-7 in the Allies' favour. However, only the 3 Anglo-Allied units in and north of Hougoumont remain shielded, and Wellington's disorganised left is vulnerable to a concerted push if enough remaining French units can be mustered to achieve it. On turn 4, Napoleon may at last make unconstrained use of 6th Corps and the Guard infantry to address the multiple threats and opportunities he faces. On the left, he makes the radical decision to abandon his attempted pincer attack on Hougomont, and to march Jérôme's strong 6th Division and D'Orbal's 12th Cavalry Division back around the woods towards the main front, while L'Héritier's and Piret's horsemen form a rearguard to cover the manoeuvre. In the centre, the Guard Light Cavalry and Foy's and Bachelou's divisions of 2nd Corps move forward to join those units already in action against Wellington's line, while the artillery redeploys to support them, and the Old and Middle Guard march north with the aim of inflicting a decisive final blow next turn. On the right, 6th Corps advances boldly to counterattack the horsemen of Ponsonby and Prince Wilhelm, with the support of cannon from 1st Corps, while the Young Guard marches to defend Plancenoit, just as it did historically. Napoleon begins with the attack by Jeannin's 20th Infantry and Soubervie's 5th Cavalry on Prince Wilhelm's horsemen. Strong supporting fire from the 1st Corps guns raises the odds to 6-3, or 2-1. The result is a foregone conclusion, thanks to the -1 French cavalry bonus, and the Prussian horse are driven back. Jeannin and Soubervie both pursue, to keep the Prussians as far from Plancenoit as they can, without going too near the side edge, though inevitably they face being overrun in the process. Simmer's and Jacquinot's stronger infantry and cavalry divisions now attack Ponsonby's exposed General Reserve horse, with support from 6th Corps' own cannon raising the odds to a similar 8-4, or 2-1. The roll of 6 would normally lead to failure, but the -1 French cavalry bonus shifts the result to an exchange, which in turn becomes defender retreat against horsemen, so the trapped Scots Greys are destroyed, just as they were in reality. Simmer stands fast, while Jacquinot opts to advance. Marconnier's infantry and the Guard Light Cavalry now attack Lambert's division at odds of 7-6, or 1-1. The roll of 3 falls to 2 because of the French cavalry bonus, and Lambert is forced back, with the Guard horsemen in pursuit. Napoleon gambles on advancing Marconnier left into an exposed position which will allow him to surround Alten in La Haye-Sainte. Before attacking the farm, Napoleon uses his 2nd Corps artillery to bombard Cook's still shielded guardsmen. At odds of 3-7, or 1-3, this has no chance of success, but it frees Bachelou's infantry to join Guillot's Guard-heavy cavalry in counter-attacking the Dutch-Belgian light horse to avenge their encirclement of Donzelot's division. At over 6-1 odds, the Dutch-Belgians are automatically destroyed, with Bachelou staying put, but Guillot's horsemen advancing to surround La Haye-Sainte from the other side. Napoleon comes finally to Foy's high-stakes attempt to retake the farm, with supporting fire from the Guard artillery raising the odds to 10-9, or 1-1, and so creating yet another tense 50-50 contest. On a roll of 5, Wellington breathes a huge sigh of relief, as Foy's infantry are repulsed, leaving Alten's 3rd Division still holding on in La Haye-Sainte, and Marconnier's men badly exposed. Napoleon has increased Allied losses from 7 points to 12, but had Foy succeeded in destroying Alten's unit and retaking the farm, the Allied loss total would have soared to 24. Wellington now realizes that his bold counterattacks and advances last turn were dangerously premature, and could yet lead to disaster. He sends the right reserve cavalry against Piret's rearguard, while Chassé's Dutch-Belgians enter the Hougomont woods in hope of sandwiching L'Héritier's division. But Clinton's infantry are moved around the north of the chateau to help preserve the last remaining shielded positions, and the Brunswickers are also called towards the centre to reconstitute a reserve as soon as possible. All other surviving Anglo-Allied units are pinned in action and unable to move for now. Frustrated that Mouton's counter-attack gives his own units little freedom to advance, Blücher sends Bulow's infantry forward into action, while the three newly entering units, representing leading elements of 1st and 2nd Corps, move up as fast as possible to bolster the drive on Plancenoit and to support Wellington's beleaguered left. Subervi's horsemen are attacked first, at overwhelming odds, by all three adjacent Prussian units, since using only the infantry would limit the odds to 3-1 and give Subervi 5 chances in 6 of pulling back unscathed. The cavalry are quickly destroyed, and Prince Wilhelm's horsemen pursue into their hex, with Blücher opting not to risk exposing Gartringen's brigade by advancing it next to the 1st Corps cannon. Hake's 13th Brigade now attacks Simmer's 19th Division, south of Papelotte, at 4-4 or 1-1 odds. On a roll of 4, Hake is repulsed, with Simmer declining to pursue. Wellington's left reserve cavalry now combine with Rissel's 14th Brigade, supported by both Prussian artillery units, to attack Jenin's smaller 20th Division. The odds of 14-2 or 6-1 must be cut by at least one column due to the high risk of friendly fire in this inter-allied attack, and so Blücher actually reduces the odds all the way to 3-1 to minimise the risk of an exchange result. On a roll of 2, Jenin's men are destroyed, due to Wilhelm's horsemen having cut their path of retreat, and the attackers advance to keep up the pressure on Napoleon's flank. South of Hougoumont, Dornberg and Grant charge Piret's 2nd Cavalry Division at odds of 3-2 or 1-1. On a roll of 3, Piret's troopers are driven back, and the right reserve cavalry must pursue into their hex. Chassé's 3rd Netherlands Division now attacks L'Héritier's surrounded horsemen from its canny flanking position in the Hougoumont woods at odds of 4-2 or 2-1. The roll of 5 increases to 6 because Chassé's men are unshielded, so they must retreat back down the road, with no pursuit allowed across the non-road hex side. Had Wellington committed the Brunswickers here as well, Kellermann's 11th Cavalry would have been destroyed. North of Hougoumont, Wellington begins by bombarding the French 2nd Corps artillery with his own 1st Corps cannon, at odds of 3-3 or 1-1. The French guns are driven back on a roll of 3, but the main benefit is to allow Cook's and Clinton's divisions to concentrate against Waterloo at odds of 13-4 or 3-1, removing any chance that Wellington's units will be forced back. If both attacking infantry divisions were unshielded, the +1 modifier would give 2 chances in 6 of one of them being lost in a bloody exchange result. But since Cook's guards are still shielded, there is only a 1 in 6 chance of this daunting outcome. The roll of 3 yields the likeliest result of a retreat by Waterloo's infantry. Wellington decides not to follow up with either of his units to avoid exposing them to counter-attack. It is now time for the most crucial Anglo-Allied attack of the turn, by Picton's infantry and the 2nd Corps artillery on Marconnier's surrounded division at odds of 9-4 or 2-1. Wellington again gets lucky, as the roll of 2 rises to 3 for the unshielded penalty, and breaks this last remaining infantry division of 1st Corps without requiring Picton's men to be sacrificed due to an exchange result. The Highlanders opt to advance left rather than straight ahead, in case Lambert's attack on the Guard Light Cavalry, at odds of 6-3 or 2-1, should go badly. The roll of 4 rises to 5 because Lambert's men are unshielded. But luckily for Wellington, the resulting exchange is converted to a defender retreat against horsemen. The British again opt to follow up to the left, so as to tie up 2 French cavalry units, while the Nassau-held Papelotte covers their line of retreat. Wellington turns finally to the hardest attack of the turn, by Alten's unshielded infantry in La Haye-Sainte on Guyot's Guard heavy cavalry, at odds of 6-4, or 1-1. Against the odds, Alten retains control of the farm, as the roll of 1 rises only to 2. He opts not to pursue, as Guyot displaces a chain of no fewer than 3 other French units in his retreat. The turn has gone better than expected for the Allies, with La Haye-Sainte retained and no precious infantry units lost, giving them an enhanced lead of 23-12 in the points count, and some reconstituted reserves to give Wellington a flexibility which he sorely missed this turn. On turn 5, the frustrated Napoleon decides to stake everything on a final push by his guard to burst through Wellington's line before the roof falls in. He sends the old and middle guard, accompanied by his brother Jérôme's huge 6th Division and half the army's cannon, to assault Alten's exhausted infantry at La Haye-Sainte, while strong supporting forces of cavalry, infantry and artillery assail Wellington's troops on either side to stop them aiding Alten. Foy's infantry and D'Urbal's horsemen are moved east to help the remnants of 6th Corps hold the line south of Papelotte, while the young guard pulls back into Plancenoit itself to exploit the building defence bonus. Napoleon begins with the continuing cavalry action south of Hougoumont. His 2 divisions together qualify for odds of 4-3 or 1-1 against Wellington's right reserve horse, but he opts to drop the odds voluntarily to 1-2, in the hope of pulling his troopers back to avoid another flank attack by Chassé's infantry. The roll of 1 remains unaffected by the French cavalry bonus, and means that Piré and L'Héritier drive back the enemy horsemen instead. The least bad option now is for Piré to pursue and recreate the dispositions when the fight began. South of Papelotte, Simmer's 19th Infantry and D'Urbal's 12th Cavalry have odds of 6-3 or 2-1 against Wellington's left reserve horse, and the French cavalry bonus makes a defender retreat result a foregone conclusion. D'Urbal decides to advance his horsemen to the right, in the hope that his sacrifice will tie up the Prussian hordes for a while, and so buy time for the more valuable French infantry behind. West of Papelotte, the 1st and Guard Light cavalry divisions charge Lambert's infantry. Supporting fire from 1st Corps' cannon brings the odds to 8-6, or 1-1. The roll of 3 falls to 2 with the French cavalry bonus, so Lambert's men must fall back. Jacquinot and Lefebvre Desnouettes both pursue, in accordance with their mission of tying up Anglo-Allied reserves while the Guard infantry attacks. North of Hougoumont, the 2nd Corps cannon bombard Cook's still shielded 1st Division. At odds of 3-7, or 1-3, this has no chance of success, but it fulfills its purpose of allowing Bachelou's infantry and Guyot's Guard heavy cavalry to concentrate against Clinton's unshielded 2nd Division at odds of 8-6, or 1-1. The roll of 4 falls to 3 with the French cavalry bonus, so just succeeds in driving Clinton back also. Guyot opts to advance left, so as to keep Clinton pinned, while using the thicker part of the Hougoumont woods to protect his own line of retreat. With the supporting flank attacks having worked as intended, it is time at last for the main event. Alten's defence strength is 9 with the building bonus, but the support of the Guard and 6th Corps cannon gives Napoleon's 3 most powerful infantry units a total attack strength of 27, just enough to achieve 3-to-1 odds and guarantee that La Haye Sainte will be retaken. Napoleon's dream is to destroy Alten's division outright on a roll of 1, but the actual roll of 6 brings a different result. Alten's unit is at last broken, but the French must lose at least 6 points themselves in exchange. At least Napoleon had the foresight to include Jérôme's big 7-point division in the attack for this very eventuality, so he does not have to lose one of his precious Guard units and forfeit an extra 6 points due to the dismay this loss would cause in the rest of the army. He advances Moron's chasseurs to seize the farmhouse and pin 2nd Corps' cannon, but he holds Friant's grenadiers back, lest they be surrounded and destroyed in a lucky counter-attack by Lambert and Picton. The loss of Alten and La Haye Sainte boosts Allied losses to the 24 points which Napoleon had hoped they would reach last turn. But the destruction of Jérôme's division boosts French losses to 30, just 10 short of the rout threshold of 40. The key question is whether the Allies can inflict these extra 10 points of losses and so rout the French army this turn, or whether the Guard will have an extra turn as dusk falls to exploit the breakthrough which it has all but achieved. On his right, Wellington orders Chassé back into the Hougoumont woods to try again to encircle L'Héritier, while sending the Brunswickers, whom he presciently recalled last turn, across to provide a tenuous backstop for his crumbling line. As with Lambert on turn 3, he makes the hard decision not to let Olferman try to help the exposed cannon to escape from Napoleon's Guard, lest the Brunswickers themselves be lost into the bargain. On his left, Wellington orders Vivian and Vandeleur to extricate themselves from the Prussian tide and ride back through La Haye to aid Lambert in his counter-attack on Jacquinot's horsemen. As on turn 4, Blücher sends his men vorwärts all along the line, from Papelotte to Plancenoit, as he strives to avenge his defeat at Ligny 2 days earlier and beat the hated emperor once and for all. Dornberg's and Grant's right reserve cavalry begin the action by charging Piret's horsemen, just as they did last turn, at 3-2 or 1-1 odds. On a roll of 1, the attackers prevail and make their compulsory pursuit. Chassé now attacks L'Héritier's surrounded 11th Cavalry once again, at 4-2 or 2-1 odds. The roll of 6 remains unchanged by the unshielded penalty, and the Dutch-Belgians recoil back out of the woods in a severe case of déjà vu. Napoleon is angry with his horsemen for not pulling back out of danger when they had the chance, but relieved that they've got away with it for a second time. Clinton's division now attacks Guyot's Guard heavy cavalry at odds of 6-4 or 1-1. Wellington could opt to have MacDonald's still shielded Hougoumont garrison join the attack, to raise the odds to 2-1 and cancel the unshielded penalty, but this would still leave a 1 in 6 chance of the chateau being lost due to an attacker retreat result, so he opts to play safe instead. On a roll of 6, increased no further by the unshielded penalty, Clinton falls back again, and Wellington thanks his stars that he kept MacDonald safely inactive. Guyot declines to advance. Cook's still shielded guardsmen now attack Bachelou's division, and this time Wellington does add supporting fire from the 1st Corps artillery, to raise the odds to 10-4 or 2-1, since even if an exchange result occurs, Bachelou's own destruction will make it more likely for the French army to rout this turn. On a roll of 2, Bachelou's men fall back instead, with Cook staying safely shielded rather than pursuing. The Second Corps artillery now makes its compulsory close-range attack on Moron's chasseurs in La Haye-Sainte, but the building defence bonus means the odds are 2 to 9, or 1 to 5, so without the Brunswickers' assistance, the guns are automatically lost. Moron stays put to guard the farm. On the other flank, Blücher begins by concentrating Rissel's 14th Brigade and all of his horsemen against D'Urbal's now surrounded 12th Cavalry Division at odds of 10 to 2, or 5 to 1. On a roll of 1, D'Urbal is destroyed outright, and the victors advance, with the horsemen cutting off the retreat of Simmer's 19th Division in turn. Blücher now attacks Simmer with close-range canister fire and with Hake's 13th Brigade in Papelotte, at odds of 8 to 4, or 2 to 1. On a roll of 4, Simmer is destroyed through inability to retreat, and Hake advances right to surround Jacquinot's horsemen, who are now assailed in turn by Lambert's infantry and the left reserve cavalry, at odds of 9 to 2, or 4 to 1. Even though the unshielded penalty creates a fearsome 3 in 6 chance of an exchange result, there is no need to lower the odds, since exchanges count as defender retreats against horsemen. The roll of 5 rises to 6, and Jacquinot's surrounded troopers are lost, with Vandeleur and Vivian having no option but to pursue into their hex. This wave of successful Allied attacks and advances shows perfectly how my tweaks invalidate the unrealistic alternate hex defence tactics in the original game. Picton's unshielded 5th Division now attacks the neighbouring Guard Light Cavalry at odds of 7 to 3, or 2 to 1. The roll of 1 rises to 2, and the Guard horsemen barrel into Friant's grenadiers as they escape the debacle. To remain secure, Picton opts not to pursue. The Allies have pushed French losses up to 38 points, tantalizingly close to the threshold of 40, but not quite there yet, thanks to Chassé's frustration in the Hougoumont woods. If no more losses can be inflicted this turn, Napoleon will get one last chance to attack on turn 6, though with his artillery unable to bombard in the failing light, even the vaunted Guard will be hard-pressed to do much more than to overrun the Brunswickers, still infuriatingly blocking a French breakthrough to encircle and roll up the more valuable Anglo-Allied infantry to either side. It is also quite possible that Napoleon will lose at least 2 more points himself during the attacks, causing the reeling French army to rout anyway after its own combat phase. Everything depends on Blücher's final attacks around Plancenoit. Against the young Guard ensconced in the village itself, the odds are 9 to 8, or 1 to 1, so, as so often in this game, fortunes turn on a 50-50 contest. On a roll of 3, Blücher rejoices as Duhem's men are ejected from the village, which he occupies with the fresh troops of 2nd Corps, while Gartringen's 16th Brigade advances right to surround Foy's division, ready for the follow-up attack by Losthin's 15th Brigade, supported by Bulow's cannon, at odds of 7 to 5, or 1 to 1. This final attack scores a 6 and is roundly repelled, allowing Foy's men to survive for now. Had the preceding attack on Plancenoit also failed, the retreating attackers would have displaced Bulow's cannon, and so cut Losthin's attack odds to 1 to 2, causing his destruction on this roll of 6, and raising Allied losses to the 30 needed for a French game victory in competitive contests. As it is, Losthin's failure is immaterial, since the presence of a Prussian unit in Plancenoit increases Napoleon's losses by 6 points to 44. So, at the end of turn 5, the French army routs and the refight ends in an Allied strategic victory. Final Allied losses total 26 points, so Napoleon is still 14 points away from pushing the Allies to the breaking point at the same time, and so suffering only a tactical defeat. Had I been playing the more balanced competitive version of the game, Napoleon would have secured game victory if at the end of any combat phase the Allies had lost at least 30 points and the French fewer than 40 points. The closest Napoleon came in this contest was after the French combat phase of turn 5, when Allied losses reached 24 points, after the Guard finally broke Alten's division and retook La Haye-Sainte. Taking and holding Hougoumont as well, or destroying just one more big Anglo-Allied infantry division by this time, would have sufficed to let the French player win a game, though not a real-world, victory. The luck of the die plays a key role in individual combats in Napoleon at Waterloo, but this is perfectly justifiable in simulation terms, as seen in the fact that Hougoumont in reality so nearly fell to Lieutenant Legros' storming party on the very first game turn. Over time, luck tends to average out over the many combat die rolls, but the unpredictability of specific events, such as whether and when each farm will fall, makes refights highly variable and dramatic, and prevents play becoming unduly stereotyped. This is especially valuable during solitaire play, since it makes every game different, and allows the player to experience the contingency of outcomes and face ever-changing tactical dilemmas, rather than just reading the familiar, though still contested, story of what really happened. What I love about Napoleon at Waterloo is that, despite the impact of luck, victory depends at least as much on player skill in exploiting hex geometry and correctly setting up and sequencing attacks and advances to surround and destroy enemy units without too many friendly units suffering a similar fate. The way in which one's forces become tied down in combat is very realistic, and rewards players who can keep some units in reserve to manage crises or exploit opportunities once enemy forces are all committed. In other respects, the simple original game system is rather bland and artificial, but by adding multiple further differences between infantry, cavalry and artillery, and between Wellington's defensive tactics and the much more mobile and offensive tactics of the French and Prussians, my tweaks present players with a whole new layer of very historical dilemmas. Along with simple changes to give a more accurate model of the dispositions and availability of the contending forces, this offers a far more satisfying broad-brush simulation of the real battle. You will probably wish to play my variant with your unmodified board game components, instead of creating a deluxe figure set just for this one, albeit classic, game and battle, as I have done. You may be interested in my simplified horse and foot conversion for Sean Chick's much more generic and modular horse and musket game system. This may also be played with figures if desired, and I've already posted tweaked scenarios for several dozen 17th century battles, including White Mountain, as shown. When time allows, I plan to expand my tweaked scenarios to model the hundreds of other battles covered by the game system, including, eventually, Waterloo itself. These are just two of the dozens of often freely posted games and game conversions I've designed, covering conflicts from antiquity to the present day. For more details, watch the other videos on my YouTube channel, and Google Sabin Wargames to find my website with all the links you need. It remains only to thank Jim Dunnigan for creating such an inspired and original system, which judicious tweaks, like those which I have proposed, can transform into a fine simulation, as well as an enjoyable and challenging game. I hope you'll have time to try my tweaks, or to experiment with your own, as you play this classic design, which, as Charles Esdale's book shows, still has a leading place among the dozens of other games on the Battle, over half a century after its original publication.